This podcast is sponsored by Paint Your Life. As a gift for her husband, Dana Gibson went to paintyourlife.com to have a portrait hand-painted of their beloved dog that they recently lost.
My reaction to this fine painting that I got from Dana was extraordinary. It just gave me butterflies in my stomach to see my beloved dog that I've had for years in such a lifelike picture.
This holiday season, give someone you love an original painting done by hand from any photo at a price you can afford. A special person, your children, even a cherished pet. In a painting done by hand by a world-class artist at paintyourlife.com. Don't wait, because right now, get 30% off your painting, plus free shipping. Just text the word GIFT to 87204. Order now to guarantee delivery for the holidays. Text GIFT to 87204. That's GIFT to 87204.
By texting 87204, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Paint Your Life. Message and data rates may apply. Terms apply. Available at paintyourlife.com/terms.
Fisher House has served over 455,000 military and veteran families with no cost to them.
I felt taken care of so that all I had to do was focus on caring for my son.
On the road to 100 Fisher Houses across the U.S. and Europe, Fisher House Foundation is an A-plus charity with a 4-star rating on Charity Navigator for 20 years in a row. Go to fisherhouse.org for more of the story and your opportunity to help our military veterans and their families when they need it most.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello everyone. Today we have our third Cheltenham Festival podcast as I look back with Sean Magee, eminent historian and author of Arkle, the world's greatest steeplechaser, at the famous race between Arkle and Mill House in the 1964 Cheltenham Gold Cup. Thank you for joining me, Sean.
Hello. Any excuse to talk about Arkle? I was delighted to be here.
I thought you might say that. Well, let's set the scene. In the green corner, we had Arkle, and in the red and white corner, we had Mill House. But that's not strictly true. Wasn't Mill House Irish bred as well?
He was Irish bred, Mill House, and he was ridden in the Gold Cup, of course, by a great Irishman, Willie Robinson. Arkle ridden by Pat Taff. So but there was a real sense of nationalism in that the Arkle was the champion of Ireland and Mill House was the champion of England. And of course, when they came to Cheltenham for the 64 Gold Cup, they had already raced against each other in the Hennessy the previous year, the Hennessy Gold Cup at Newbury. And Mill House won that race, and he was at that point the reigning Cheltenham Gold Cup winner, and he won the race at Newbury, the Hennessy, and giving Arkle £5. So I mean, it was a very comprehensive beating, and he was a huge horse, Mill House. He was known as the big horse, but he was seriously big. And had a fantastic stride on him, and he was a terrific jumper. He won the Hennessy fairly easily, and Arkle was third. And a free Kit Kat to anybody who can tell me the horse who finished second.
I'll have to leave that one. We'll have to leave that open to anyone on Twitter who wants to answer the question, who did come second. But just going back a bit, can I ask you, just setting the scene again for this clash in March 1964, what were the two horses' respective ages on the 7th of March 1964? And tell me more about the teams behind both horses.
They were both 7. Mill House won the Cheltenham Gold Cup at the age of 6, and that Cheltenham, Arkle ran in and won the Broadway Chase, which is the for staying novice chasers. Well, this is interesting, of course, the background of racehorses. Arkle was owned by Anne Duchess of Westminster, who was a very Duchess. Her husband had died not long ago before, and trained near Ashbourne, trained by Tom Draper, who was and usually ridden in all his steeplechases by Pat Taff. And it was often said by people who understand these things, like John Oaksey or John Lawrence, as he was in those days, what they gave a young horse was time. You didn't have to keep winning with it or anything like that. And they were avowed to the idea of time, relaxation, let them develop, let them grow into their frames and so on. Arkle was not a classically beautiful horse in the way that some horses are. He was fantastic temperamentally, and he was very lucky, therefore, to be bought at the sales in Dublin for 1,150 guineas, which is not bad value, and then given a lot of time at the Duchess's estate in Cheshire, and just given time. Slightly by contrast, Mill House was trained by Fruit Warwin in Berkshire, in Lambourne, and ridden in some of his races by Willie Robinson, who was a great horseman himself. Of course, the unusual thing about Willie Robinson, sorry to get a bit off the beaten track, he not only won all those big steeplechases, he was runner-up in the Derby. And not many people know that.
No, I didn't know that one.
Well, there you are.
I'm learning all the time.
We've learned something today. So, of the two, Arkle was given the sort of classical time, again, the word, but it's the right word, and Mill House was rather more hit and miss. On the other hand, as I just mentioned, Mill House won the Cheltenham Gold Cup in '63 at the age of 6. Arkle won his Cheltenham Festival race also at the age of 6. And so they were both young, potentially brilliant, but very young, fairly raw, and gradually were given time. Fruit Warwin was a wonderfully patient trainer, and the level of horses that he ran was just extraordinary.
And Fruit Warwin had won the Gold Cup in 1962 as well as 63 with Mill House. 62 being Mandarin. Better known as winning the Grand Steeplechase de Paris, but then probably remembered as a Gold Cup winner, but he was a very good Gold Cup winner. And if you look through sort of histories of steeplechasing, you get wonderful photographs of Mandarin, of taxidermist horses like that, and Kirsten and Linwell and all these horses who ran frequently. And then when sponsorship was becoming more and more widespread, they had decent prize money to aim at, and so there were sort of successions of really top-class competition between these terrific cohort of horse steeplechasers. Let's move on to the Cheltenham Gold Cup of 1964. And can you give me an indication of what the build-up was like in the media before the race?
Well, it was interesting, and I was a teenager at the time. They were clearly two wonderfully promising racehorses, and there was this. There was quite a lot of the coverage was based on the idea of, as we just said, Arkle, the Irishman, Mill House, the Englishman, and there was a lot in the last few days up to the race, which interestingly that year was on a Saturday rather than the traditional Thursday, and the BBC gave extensive coverage to it, and it got made a lot of fuss of it as a blue ribbon of the turf type race. There was just a feeling that there was something very, 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 very special going on between these two horses. As I say, Mill House had beaten Arkle. The Arkle connections knew or felt that they would never be beaten again by Mill House, and they turned out to be right. And it was just listening to Peter O'Sullivan's commentaries and this sort of thing. You could tell that all the top journalists like Hugh McIlvanney, the late, great Hugh McIlvanney, wrote a wonderful piece about describing the Sunday, the day after the 64 Gold Cup, in which he writes about the everybody on the Irish side sort of getting more and more excited, and priests, suddenly started yelling home the Irish champion.
But on the day, who in general did the racing experts tip to win the race?
Mostly they tipped Mill House because he had done it, as I mentioned a while ago. He was giving weight to Arkle. It was pretty tight. Right, the first thing to say is there were 4 runners only. People are complaining a lot of the time about the lack of runners in some of the most valuable races, but occasionally, like with this Gold Cup 64, it was almost part of the atmosphere in that there were only 4, so you could read the race much more cleanly in some ways. The other 2 were King's Nephew, who's a very good staying chaser, and Parcel, who had won the Gold Cup in 1960, and an indication of the lopsided nature of this field. Mill House was 13-8 on favourite. Arkle was 7-4 against. King's Nephew was 20-1, and Parcel was out with the washing at 50-1. So that was the nature of it. It was very much a 2-horse race, and so it was to prove.
Why only 4 runners, though?
They were mostly scared off, I think, by the prospect of running against these exceptional young horses. Also, if you look at the field for the Grand National a few weeks later, there are horses who might have a few horses in the Grand National who might, had the Gold Cup been more open, might have gone for the Gold Cup. But the fact was that there were 2 absolutely, of course, like the race to come. The thing is, they were 2 exceptional horses, and the fact that there were only a small field was attesting from a different angle that there were only 2 horses in it. Really, I think the distance between Mill House in second and Parcel in third, Parcel was third, was something like 25 lengths. I mean, it was a hell of a long way. And the simple explanation is that the lesser horses were scared off by the exceptional talent of Mill House and Arkle.
And we've talked about this off air, but why was the race run on a Saturday?
That is a great conundrum. Some people think it was moved to a Saturday, but it can't have been, because the fixtures were, and therefore the decision to move it from a Thursday Gold Cup to a Saturday Gold Cup. This change had been effected when the fixtures were first published towards the end of 1963, and so it was just experimenting or just changing in order to generate a race like that, albeit with 4 runners, and because nobody, when the fixtures were published, it would not have been known that this would boil down to 2 horses at Cheltenham in March, if you follow.
Let's now talk about the race. How did that go? And were there any early clues that Arkle was coming on top?
There were, yes. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but the race, the Gold Cup, started on a spur. It wasn't part of the sort of general circuit. And as soon as the flag dropped, I think they had possibly two fences between that and getting onto racecourse proper. And Mill House went straight away into the lead. And if you look at the race now, which you can easily find on YouTube or whatever, and it's well worth it to watch, Mill House had this huge, devouring stride, and he went straight off into the lead. But Arkle kept reasonably close to him, but was pulling like mad. I mean, he looked really difficult. He was trained, of course, to be very fit. But for the first circuit and a half, it was Mill House leading, with Arkle trying to get by him, and Pat Taff sort of almost standing up in his stirrups, trying to get Arkle to calm down or to slow down a bit. And it was, and then at the top of the hill, where so many Cheltenham races had decided, Pat Taff decided clearly it was time to get Arkle about his business a bit. And as they came down the hill, you could hear, even on the telly, you could hear people calling Arkle home. The priests, as McElvany wrote, but you could tell exactly who were the Irish contingents and who were the English contingent. And they came belting down with towards the second last, as it was in those days, before the bend. And Arkle just sort of eased past Mill House and round the corner into the straight proper, and just scampered is really the only word for it. He was hugely superior to Mill House that day and probably ever after. And he scampered round the bend, popped over the last fence, up the hill, and cued delirium because he got a fantastic. Because Arkle was clearly the greatest, the best. Even at that age, he was 7, Mill House was 7, but you could tell that, barring accidents, Mill House would never beat Arkle. Great horse, Mill House, but sad to be foaled in the same year as a freak.
And Peter O'Sullivan said, the best we have seen for a long time.
Yeah.
What was the winning margin?
5 lengths. I think it was 5 lengths. But it was the ease with which he did it, which was extraordinary. People couldn't believe it, how good he was. And thereafter, of course, he became the greatest of all steeplechasers, in my opinion and the opinion of many others.
What was the reaction from the two stables after the race?
Well, in those days, they didn't immediately stick a microphone under somebody's chin to be interviewed. And I mean, mostly in the press, it was just understood that Arkle was the best. And these people knew the crowd and the connections. They knew about the horses, and they knew that Arkle was very, very special.
Thought Warwin couldn't believe that he'd lost.
I think that's right. And also, Bruff Scott, I think, was riding in a race when he was an amateur that day. And he wrote about of course, being Bruff, he wrote about, after the race, in the jockey's weighing room, Willie Robinson, who'd ridden Mill House, and just could not believe that any horse that had ever been foaled had treated Mill House in that way, with complete disdain. There was that was the mood, really, and that people knew that this horse was quite exceptional. And Fruit William, for instance, was not. He knew horses as well as anybody ever, and he would have known that Arkle. And the press the day after, it was all that this is Wonder Horse, Arkle the Wonder Horse. But the other source of amusement about this famous race, and really a mark of how famous it was, the 64 Gold Cup, is that there was a song record issued on vinyl, a single called Arkle, and it was by Dominic Behan, who's the brother of Brendan Behan, the playwright. And this is a song lampooning how the English racing aristocracy was sneery about Arkle, this upstart horse, and Arkle, of course, eventually won. And it was all to do with the superiority of the English being completely crushed by the brilliance of the Irish, and it was a great song. I would sing it to you now, but we haven't got copyright, I think.
No, and I don't think listeners would want to hear you sing, probably, would they?
No, carry on.
But their rivalry did continue, and they clashed several more times. What happened when they met again?
In brief, the score, they met each other 5 times. After the 64 Gold Cup, of course, it was 1-1. And then they met in the Gold Cup in 65, a small field, but by then there was no question that Arkle was a freak and was in a category all of his own. Mill House was second to Arkle, and then they ran in the Hennessy Gold Cup, which Arkle won easily, and their last showdown, as it were, was at a race called the Gallagher Gold Cup at Sandown Park in November 1965. And his rivals included Rondetto, who you might remember anyway, was a very famous...
Foynaven.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All sorts of races. He was third in the national at the age of 13, which would take some doing. Anyway, Arkle won this in record time by a street, and it was thought that Mill House had enough of following Arkle home. Mill House was ridden in this Sandown Park race by David Nicholson because Willie Robinson was injured, I think, and Arkle was conceding £16. As they came round the railway fences, it was as if Pat Taff on Arkle just clicked his fingers, and Arkle shot off. He shot off at the end of 3 mile, whatever, race, and it was like a single emblem of the brilliance of this horse. He was completely in a different league, and that's the best, the best legacy you have. This one sheer burst of speed at Sandown, which was glorious to behold.
Well, Arkle got injured in the King George of 1966. Do you think if he was fit, he would have won the Gold Cup in 67, 68 even?
Yes, I think he must have done, partly because there was no obvious contenders. And I would have thought, I think it's generally thought that he would have got 2 more at least Gold Cups, and therefore joining Golden Miller, who won 5 times. But I don't think in a sense it matters that you wouldn't. There's obviously been debate about Arkle and Golden Miller, but the style of racing appears to be... Golden Miller was flawed. He would sort of run poor races, and he was more... he was less brilliant. I think less brilliant is the phrase, whereas Arkle was perfect.
And do you think that Mill House gets forgotten? There's lots of books, including yourself, written by yourself about Arkle, and yet you can't find any book about Mill House.
No, that's a good question. I think I hadn't thought about that. Nowadays, it would be difficult to sell a book about Mill House. The story is interesting because after the Gold Cup, Mill House was narrowly beaten in the Whitbread at Sandown, and he ran a lot of other very good races, but nothing to match Arkle. Arkle won 2 Hennessy's, 3 Leopardstown Chases, Whitbread, everything. One of the things often said about Arkle is that he would compete against horses with huge weight differentials. In those days, the top weight would probably be 12 stone 7. On one occasion, in the Massey Ferguson Gold Cup at Cheltenham, Arkle carried 12 stone 10. And it's this sort of thing, the ability to shrug off huge weight differential is really what made Arkle so transcendent.
But where does Mill House, though, stand in the rankings of top steeplechasers?
Well, he probably, in terms of the crowd's affection for him, it's very high. In terms of the form book, it's just below the absolute top. And you can only go so far with weight and ratings and so on. And the horse who nearest Arkle at all was his stablemate, Flyingbolt, who was an utterly brilliant horse and got within 2 pounds of it in the handicap, and yet Flyingbolt is the without a doubt the little boy that Santa Claus forgot. I mean, he was within 2 pounds of Arkle, and he wasn't loved in the same way as Arkle. He would bite people and he would try to kick people, Flyingbolt, and yet he was utterly brilliant, as I mentioned. He won the champion chase, and then the following day I was third in the champion hurdle. So I think when a few years ago they had a poll in the Racing Post for people's favourite race horse, and of course Arkle won this, but Flyingbolt was not even mentioned in 100 entries, and he was forgotten. But he was utterly brilliant. But he got ill. Arkle had a very bad medical problems, as it were, and only lived until he was 13, which is absolutely nothing in a horse. And very sad. He never ran again after that, King George, as you mentioned.
Coming up in our next episode, a truly compelling one with Patrick Foster, the former professional cricketer who became a gambling addict, but who has now turned his life around. Here's a short clip from episode 111.
It is, for some people, quite frightening what it does to you, and when it takes hold of you, how much your addiction consumes you and totally monopolizes your life.
And Flyingbolt, talking of him, he raced at the Cheltenham Festival in 1964 and won there, I think, on the first day.
Yes, I think that's right. That's Gloucester Hurdle, was it? Anyway, I think that's right. But they never raced against each other, Arkle and Flyingbolt. And Paddy Woods, who used to ride Arkle every day, who is still with us, thank goodness. And I'm in touch with him mostly about matters relating to Arkle. And he said that they once, on the gallops at Draper's, they pitched Arkle against Flyingbolt for a particular gallop, and they took each other on, these two, and they just couldn't. They just went like the clappers, and never galloped each against the other again, because they were just so competitive. They were just could scarcely be contained. And other people, and Liam McLaughlin, who was another of Draper's lads, he was convinced that Flyingbolt was the better of the two. And I it's fair enough. These people are very close to these horses, and have a unique way of assessing them. But I think to keep them apart was the important thing.
Well, returning to the 1964 Cheltenham Gold Cup, where do you think the race stands with regard to sort of famous clashes? I mean, this century we had Denman against Courto Star in 4 successive Cheltenham Gold Cups. But where does the 1964 clash stand in the all-time steeplechasers, really?
I would have thought it would. Well, having first said that it is impossible to do state anything definitive, I would have thought it was right up there. Races are sort of divide between, famous battles and just sheer class, races of sheer class. And if you watch, I don't know, Frankel's 2,000 guineas, you're going to be pretty impressed. And without him being competitive, he just blew all his rivals away, and that was a classic. I would have thought that Arkle the 64 would be right up there. And for people like me, it'll keep me quiet for years, I hope.
Well, I hope so. And thank you again for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion. You feature in a forthcoming podcast where we're also going to be talking about another big clash, which is round 2 of Shiskin versus Energumene on Wednesday, the 16th of March. Thank you for looking back at the 1964 Cheltenham Gold Cup, Arkle, Mill House, and 2 others.
Thank you.
Right.
I've really enjoyed this new assessment of my beloved Arkle, and may he always be remembered.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for listening to The Paddock and the Pavilion. You can download the show on Apple Podcasts,
Amazon Music,
SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify.
Follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at The Pad and Pav. Don't forget, if you like the show, please do leave us a rating and review.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Fisher House has served over 455,000 military and veteran families with no cost to them.
I felt taken care of, so that all I had to do was focus on caring for my son.
On the road to 100 Fisher Houses across the U.S. and Europe, Fisher House Foundation is an A+ charity with a 4-star rating on Charity Navigator for 20 years in a row. Go to fisherhouse.org for more of the story and your opportunity to help our military veterans and their families when they need it most.